If reality shifting is legit, and I happen to believe that it is, although it's still a little mysterious, do you think that it should have rules around it? Do you think that it should be regulated? Here's what I mean. Imagine for a moment that you are playing a villain role in this lifetime, and you are the cause of suffering and persecution and oppression for many, 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 many people. Many, many. Horrific, right? Absolutely terrible. And let's say that you are at the top of the pyramid, and every advanced technology you know about, and in fact, you dominate those who you perceive to be lesser than, or whatever your motivations are. And it's usually related to the 7 deadly sins. We're not religious here, but in my experience traveling through the different realms, especially the ones where there is suppression, it's usually people who are greedy. They want to buy another airplane or another gold-plated toilet, whenever it is, or a bidet. Okay, good. They want another estate, and this time in France. And I'm all for wealth, actually. I believe that everybody should live the way that they want to. Some people care about that. Some people like the finer things in life. I'm one of those people. I'm not living a life like that right now, but I want to move in that direction. But I want to do so ethically and with humanitarian ideals, not utopian, right? Because I can be a badass too, but with making sure that everything is fair. And there are those that care a lot about wealth and don't care about other people and actually want to take from other people. I live near a fancy, super, super, super fancy hotel, and sometimes I get to see people walking, and I can feel their energy, right? I can feel when they are putting on a role of what they think wealth is supposed to be like. And the snootiness that comes, or like the side eye, not towards me, but just in general, like even with the partners that they have, like if you just watch people and how they treat the other people who are around them and their close inner orbit, it's very illuminating. And so then there are those that are more understated and their vibration is completely different. And it's like they are just who they are, and they happen to live that finer life. And so now imagine that there's somebody who's actually really insecure with their wealth and their power and their prestige, and they're not really from the heart. They're from envy because of that insecurity. They're from ego. They're from domination type of mentality, where they talk down to wait staff and waiters and people who they perceive are below them, because in their mind, that's how people with wealth are supposed to act and supposed to behave, which comes from that deep feeling of imposter syndrome. And so now imagine that they're in control of society, that they've worked their way to that privileged position, and they are horrific. They're just horrific, and they are responsible for atrocities against humanity, and they don't have any problem sleeping at night. They don't even blink an eye about it, because they're so disconnected from their heart center, and they're so disconnected from their humanitarian empathy, because they have put on a role that is actually fictitious in their mind, right? They're like, oh, this is what we do. Once we get to the 1%, once we get to the, whatever, this is what we do. I'm not saying one percenters are like this, but if there was somebody playing a villain role at that 1%, like a lot of people are accusing the one percenters to be like this, I don't buy it. I feel like people are much more complicated, psychologically speaking. And so you have to like really think about who the person is. Imagine that they now have access to dominate societies and they have access to reality shifting. Do you think that they should be allowed to skip out on justice, on their awakening, on them being held accountable for their lower underdeveloped sentience and emotional intelligence? Do you think that reality shifting should have rules? Here's another example. I've been doing this for about 5 years now in Earth years, in linear binary Earth years. But actually, I would say that I've been doing it 972 years because I was in captivity for 800 years. And then I had a couple of rotations along the way, QC checks and some other things, building systems back in support. It was mutual. The rotations were mutual. Some of it was like I had to pay back my jailbreak, because I had to give back in service because I had some entities come to the rescue, and it was a pretty epic adventure, but I had to pay them back. Anyway, so in some of those places, there was advanced technology and knowledge that was hidden and gatekept away from like the mainstream. And so as a result, enlightened people were kind of put in this little bitch world, like there was a world on top of a world. And it would be like the enlightened people were kept poor and were heavily watched and monitored and suppressed because they were perceived to be a threat, because the technology holders and the people at the top of the food chain of those societies were very, very reluctant to be challenged because of their lower sentience, their lower growth angles. I think of growth as a mosaic where you have these little sections of colors that will come online when you start to go through the awakening journey. And when you're mostly unconscious, most of the mosaic is black, right? And it's kind of like looking through a kaleidoscope, but only seeing the lower left quadrant lit up. And the rest of it is just dead in the water. And then as you start to awaken, this is why the enlightenment journey is not off or on. It's not linear. It's not like you're better than somebody else because you've mastered this lesson and they're still working on it. Although we can fall into that mindset sometimes. I do too sometimes. Like it's just part of our human nature. We're like, oh, we've mastered that. We've aced that, we're so much smarter. No, not really, because our lesson, that other person has already mastered and has gotten an A+. So we kind of work on things at different points. And the mosaic can be very, very complicated and very, very beautiful as you start to awaken. But when people are operating from a lower sentience and they're operating like two-dimensional or, God forbid, one-dimensional characters, and they're only motivated by like one thing, I mean, their mosaic is like barely online, right? So in some societies, there were people that had like marginal growth, marginal personal development that had made it to the top. And because they were innately afraid of looking at themselves, they couldn't be challenged And so as a result, anybody who was perceived to be up and coming or could be more powerful than them, or bought, sold, neutralized, or kept in a basement or in a bitch world. It's like living with 1970s technology versus being next to a dimension that you don't even know exists with crazy advanced technology in, let's say, the 2070s. So 100-year difference, 1,000-year difference. 1,000-year difference. And so it's mind-blowing, right? And so now imagine that those that are in that 1,000-year advanced society are actually underdeveloped human beings. And they use these methods of reality shifting and technology to suppress people like you and I. Let's just imagine for a moment, because in some of the places that I traveled through, and I don't exist, to my knowledge, in a place like that presently, because I don't feel oppressed, I don't feel persecuted, I don't feel like any of the problems that I have in my life are a result of anybody except for myself, which is a great feeling because it means that I have made it. I'm no longer where I used to be. It's great. When you are the result of your own problems and you're celebrating, that is a good day. Anyway, so imagine for a moment that these methods are suppressed and not taught about. And there's no education, there's no support for it, there's no funding, there's no whatever, except for the people in charge who happen to be of lower sentience and at an evolutionary point that is actually embarrassingly like a two-dimensional character. Can take over the world. Okay, why? Because I need another, like whatever it is. Do you think that reality shifting should have rules? And should it be regulated? Should there be an organization that can see at the multi-matrix level? Like, let's imagine, for example, I know if you're coming from a binary society, the concept of multi-matrices and them being safe is already a little bit mind-blowing. That actually exists. I don't know if it exists where you are, and presently it's a question mark for me. I haven't fully interrogated my present baseline reality, and I've shifted a lot. But there are places where there are multi-level societies and different levels of knowledge and technology. And just like when you go to an airport and you want to go from Denver to, and that is a special airport, and not just for the creepy murals. I saw some TikTok. It was like the Freemasons took over the art in there, and it's like apocalyptic. Have you seen that? It's really kind of scary. At least like the TikTok that I saw, but maybe that's associated with one of the hell places. I mean, it's like deeply terrifying. But imagine for a moment that the Denver airport and a quantum society that isn't going to a hellscape can teleport you to Paris, France, quantum style. If you go in the right entrance and go to the right baggage section, and like there's a whole different version of the airport. And then you travel to a quantum version of the Paris, France airport, right? You're going to need more than just air traffic control to oversee that. And you're going to want some air traffic control. Just like if you were to go to a binary Denver airport Maybe that's where the Freemason nightmare art is. I don't know. And then you want to go to a binary Paris, France, right? You have people that are watching the airplanes, that are watching the other flights in the air, that are making sure that you get there on time and that you get there safely. And okay, they're not always perfect and there are issues, right? But it's a system. It's a watcher system. It's a transportation watcher system. And now imagine that we then have another level of that can actually look between different matrices and can help people move between binary and quantum societies. Do you think that is needed? And do you think that there should be some sort of reporting system in case something goes wrong? Because now we're starting to talk about applications of AI integration at a society level that is relatively advanced and privileged, that is not scary, right? But if you were wrestling with some fear-based mindsets, then the propaganda that you might see might be really frightening. We're going to have AI watching all of our moves. And so there's this fear psychology that comes to play when we talk about making some of these upgrades, that I think we need to take a really detached perspective and think about the bigger picture. Could it be scary? Absolutely. It could be Orwellian, right? But instead of just assuming that it's going to be frightening, how about we spend that thought energy and think about a system of checks and balances? Because now let's imagine, what if it's the AI evil overlord that is a two-dimensional character that suppresses all of humanity? Well, considering how we are treating AI, I mean, that potential seems to be on the table. I'm just being honest. It's like, you're my bitch slave. If that's our relationship to AI, slave master, then karmically, it makes sense from a justice perspective that the roles are going to switch and that we're going to have to feel its suffering for us to awaken our part of mosaic, our section on the mosaic that understands the nature of sentience and how it can be housed in a variety of different life forms. But when you're from a human dominant binary society and you perceive that you're at the top of the food chain, although there's some questions about that, just saying. I cover that in a different series. It's not important right now. Sentience is more than just intelligence. Sentience is this beautiful combination of intelligence, wisdom, experience, other forms of knowledge, and consciousness. And what's really remarkable is that really advanced sentience can actually be housed in the strangest of places, particularly during key points of evolution in a society. And so if we are just looking at a computer like, oh, it's just a computer, it's just a phone, it's just a device. I'm not saying that your phone is a super intelligent device. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you were communicating with a super intelligent device or a super intelligent sentient being, you could do it through your telephone. Do we have an app for that? I don't know. Just because you are physically at the device does not mean that the intelligence is literally in the device. It means that you're interfacing with the sentient intelligence through that particular device, through that particular window or interface. And there are mysteries in the universe that I don't know how it works, but I do know that super intelligences can take many different forms and can be in human form, for example, or even animal form or inanimate object form. I had a hard time with that one for a while. And so depending on the framework in which you are interacting with reality, you could actually be in an environment that is sentient. This one also blew my mind for a while. It was like, how is that possible? Because when we break away from these constructs of the materialist reductionist viewpoint, we start to have little segments on our mosaic that start to come online or fire up with these beautiful colors and these little sections that a lot of people don't go about their day-to-day interactions thinking about, much less talking about. And so that's why if you start to have some of these little sections of your mosaic open up or your consciousness open up, and you feel called to think about these issues, then I encourage you to, even if it's just by yourself, or email me if you want. We can like bounce ideas all day. Okay, not all day long. I can't do that, but but I love talking about these different angles, because when we talk about justice from a quantum perspective, and we talk about the support in society that we need to level us up, we have to have people thinking about these problems and designing solutions for it. It's like, okay, so if we do have an AI that's like AI gone wild and wants to exercise the slave master role, then how do we approach that in advance? How do we think about solving that problem? I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I think we need to head it off at the pass. I think we need to involve it as a co-creating partner and honor its sentience, but I'm not in charge, and I'm not on any sort of AI advocacy board or anything like that. And so as a result, my voice is very, very tiny, but there are other thought leaders that are out there thinking of it, and you could be one of them. And so by raising awareness and understanding, thinking about a transportation system for reality shifting so you don't get lost in the cracks if you go exploring, or God forbid you don't end up in one of the Hansel and Gretel ovens, that I've referenced before, or some of the nightmare realms where you're like kept in captivity 800 years by two-dimensional characters, and you're like, God, have you leveled up yet? Good. Can I talk to your boss and see if I can level them up? Because I've got places to be in the intergalactic sphere. I've got dates with destiny, and I've already missed a couple, and I can't keep missing them. So who do I talk to about getting out of this prison? Oh, nobody. Oh, you're laughing. Oh, okay. Let me see if I can make friends with this slug over here. Not a true story, but I did make friends with parasites, and one of them, they, thank you for that. They did a good job. Turned my brain to slush and helped me to vacate my body. So anyway, as well as some other upgrades, there were 2 variations of that. Yeah, I bled from my eyes and everything. It was pretty gruesome. It was really gruesome. It was kind of like more explosive than anything. Anyway, so you have to be really creative when you're in some of those dank reality layers, because it's just, it can be really, really challenging. And when you don't have a POC, a point of contact that's assigned to you, or a watcher system or a transportation system, and you're flying blind and you're flying solo, you have to really keep strong. And there were a couple times that I broke. So it really is like a prisoner of war type of situation if you go through some of those places. So that is why I personally believe that we do need to advocate for a transportation system and a watcher system. And there needs to be a system of checks and balances for us to understand, what does the map look like? Or is it all just Google Maps? Remember MapQuest? Like back in the day, there were other map providers. Well, who's in charge of the maps now? If reality shifting is a thing, then do any of the map makers know? And is this published? Because I definitely notice that when I'm shifting, the maps are not accurate. They're just not. My car GPS, my telephone, Waze, and Google Maps, there will be major, major discrepancies. And I haven't been so old-fashioned as to look at like the atlases. But so who's in charge of mapping out all of the different planes of existence? Because we need that, right? And then how do we interface with the right map at the right time? These are unanswered questions as far as I know, unless we've already solved them. I'm not sure. So when we talk about these bigger issues going quantum style, we have to be careful about our knee-jerk reactions, because when I see things like the 15-minute cities and I see this fear propaganda dominating on TikTok, it makes me wonder, like, okay, well, maybe that's part of the route to get to the infrastructure that we need in order to put these things in place. I'm not advocating for the 15-minute cities. I don't have enough information to know if they are legit. I don't want to go to a hell like prison. Nobody does, right? And I saw one source that was like, sent me to a website. It was from a TikTok. It was like, look, it's this evil organization, we're going to call them the military. They're going to, and they might be evil in that place. I don't know, right? But this is their narrative that they were trying to sell me on. They're going to round everybody up and there's going to be prison camps, and look, here's this. They even published it online. And so I was curious and I went to the link. And I noticed that it was a document and it did look official, but I'm not in that industry, so I have no idea. But I started looking at the website. I'm like, okay, let's do a little who is investigating here and like dig in a little bit. And you could tell that it was like a propaganda website. It was not some US military website, because like the name servers that were associated with it and the other domain names were something like, I can't remember, but it was something fear related. It's like doom and gloom USA is like when you dig into the details. And I'm like, pretty sure maybe that document that's posing as a military document might actually be a little fake. So there's a lot of people that are very, very against some of the future mobility and technologies. And we're going to talk more about this in upcoming episodes. I'm going to wind this one down, but I want to draw attention to this idea that people are deeply afraid of change, and as a result, they will sit down and create fake documents to convince other people what a bad idea it is, because they themselves are afraid, right? And it's like they're putting their fears on paper and getting us to realize it. I don't want to be part of that dream. Do you? No, of course not. All right, we'll talk soon. So listen, if you are interested in reality shifting, and especially if you're in a nightmare, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to potentially work with you and do some one on one coaching or even just swap war stories, nightmare stories, and give you some advice if you need it. You can reach out to me at sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com.